Hello dear students, this is Industrial Relations and Labor Laws tutorial. This is tutorial 1.4. The topic of this tutorial is Evolution of Industrial Relations in India. Learning objectives are to understand the evolution of industrial relations in India and to know the distinct characteristics of industrial relation in the various phases of evolution. Evolution, as the meaning is the gradual development and the changes that is taking place in a particular happening or particular event. Here, the event or the phenomena is industrial relations. This industrial relations is a byproduct of industrial revolution. This industrial revolution is an phenomena that took place in the European countries and US in the 18th century. However, it reaches India also, though it takes some time. Industrial relations, it is a relation that occurs in society. The relations is between the management and the workers, or you can say employers and employee. In present times, in industrial relation, not only the employers and employees, but other parties like employees organization or trade union, employers organization, then state intervention, communities, then consumers, these are also included in the relationship. However, this relationship as it in the present days, it was not in the beginning or it was not in the early days. As I told you, in case of India, in ancient period, India was an agrarian country and therefore that type of relationship, it was not usually seen in those days. The time of evolution or the timeline of evolution, it need a division into 4 periods. Since industrial relation, this is a relationship that occur in society and therefore the social events or the various changes that take place in society that influence industrial relations. Those remarkable events or happenings of various time periods shape industrial relations of those times, and therefore it has distinct characteristics in the various phases, and those phases we need to classify or categorize, and therefore this is categorized into basically 4 periods. First, ancient period, then colonial period, or you can say pre-independence period, then post-colonial period or post-independence period, and lastly it is post-liberalization period. So in this tutorial, I'm going to discuss the first 2 periods, that is ancient period and the colonial period or pre-independence period. And the rest 2 period that will be continued in another tutorial, that is tutorial 1.5. These 4 time periods characterize occurrence of remarkable events respective to the socioeconomic structure and environment of that period, which are distinctively different from each other. Those events or happenings in and out of India in that period changes the social relations in general and employee-employer relations or industrial relations in particular. Let's discuss industrial relations in ancient period. In ancient period, there were no industrial establishment or factory system in India. Production works were mostly undertaken in cottage industries where the family members worked, and it was mostly hereditary. The family members, they gave labor in those home-based industry or cottage industry. And industrial relations, therefore, it was non-institutionalized form. In those days, slavery was very common. Employee relations were those of master and slave, and later on of those of master and servant. Laws of those days laid emphasis on the promotion of peaceful relation between capital and labor. Kautilya's Arthashastra give a good description of unions of employees, craftsmen and artisans. There were well-organized guilds known as shrainis, which work according to their own bylaws for the management of the unions. Every shraini include almost 1,000 members. The shraini elected its chief, who is called Pramukh or Jyeshtha. During foreign invasion, most of the art and crafts work in India damaged, and the artisans or craftsmen fled in large number from their original homes. And this led to the deterioration. The status of artisans became like that of slaves. Industrial relations in colonial period. The two wars, First World War of 1920s and Second World War of 1940s, gave major push to the field of industrial relations. It was for the first time during the First World War, workers realized the importance that unless they produce goods required for war, the wars cannot be fought. After war, prices of consumer goods become dearer. Again, the Great Depression of 1920s aggravated the economic problems. The labor market was severely affected by all these things, and this led to labor unrest. Employment relations were found to institutionalized in 1920s when Trade Union Act 1926 was formulated. In the colonial period, many other events happened which accelerated the pace of industrial relations. Some of those events are establishment of International Labour Organization in 1919 and the influence of its conventions and recommendations. Then constitutional development in India and formation of central and provincial legislatures in 1919. Establishment of All India Trade Union Congress in 1920. Then the happenings of Carnatic and Buckingham Mills, in which B.P. Wadia was arrested in 1923. This Buckingham and Carnatic Mills were textile mills run by Binny and Company in the city of Chennai, which was Madras in those times. In 1921, the workers of mills struck against the managing company, demanding a pay hike, and this strike lasted from June to October 1921. So this strike was for a very long time, and this causes severe losses to the economy. It was the first major industrial unrest in South India. BP Wadia, he founded Madras Textile Workers Union in 1909 and founded Madras Labour Union in 1918. Indian Trade Union Act of 1926. This is another major event of that period. This act provides for registration of trade unions and defined the law relating to registered trade unions. So this is another thing which help in institutionalization of industrial relations. The Trade Dispute Act 1929. This is another major event. Prior to Industrial Dispute Act 1947, which is prevailing now, Trade Dispute Act 1929 used to settle industrial disputes. Then formation of Royal Commission of Labour 1929 to 31. So this is the period that the commission lasts. This commission pointed out the need for systematic collection of labor statistics so as to assist in policy formulation for development of workers or employees. So this is one of the significant things done by that Royal Commission on Labor. The Second World War gave a new spark in the field of industrial relations. The exigency of war made it essential for the government to maintain uninterrupted flow of goods and services for successful operations of war. Therefore, the government of India embarked upon a twofold action for maintaining industrial relations. Number one, that is statutory regulation of industrial relation through the Defence of India rules. Rule 81A, which regulated industrial relations during the war, was kept alive for 6 months by an ordinance. Meanwhile, the tripartite deliberation during 1942 to 46 on the revision of Trade Dispute Act 1929 helped the Union government in enacting the Industrial Dispute Act 1947, which laid down a comprehensive dispute settlement machinery to be applicable to all the states. This act retained one of the principal features of Defence of India rules, that is, compulsory adjudication of industrial disputes. First tripartite labor conference was held at New Delhi under the chairmanship of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar in the year 1942. The conference consisted of two organizations, namely the Indian Labour Conference and Standing Labour Committee. These tripartite bodies were essentially deliberative, recommendatory, and advisory in nature, and the area of their operation depended upon the discretion of the central government. The need for tripartite labor machinery on pattern of International Labour Organization was recommended by the Royal Commission on Labour in 1931. Tripartite deliberation helped to reach consensus on statutory minimum wage fixation, constitution of tripartite industrial committees, introduction of a health insurance scheme, and provident fund scheme. Thus, it led to the passing of three important central labor laws. Those are Minimum Wages Act 1948, the Employees State Insurance Act 1948, the Employees Provident Fund Act 1952. So, till here, you have noticed that in ancient period, there was literally there was no industrial relation in India. Although, as in ancient period, in India, the people, they were classified into various classes. Those are Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra. These Shudra class people, they were mostly considered as labor class people. They are the one who did not have property, and therefore they have to offer their labor and earn their livelihood. And therefore their relationship was like master and slave. And this relations little bit improved gradually in the colonial period, and because in colonial period those the artisans or the workers, they were found to have some organization, and those organizations are, which is called Shreni, they had their own bylaws for their members. And in colonial period, the distinct characteristic is that the industrial relation that is found to be regulated by some laws that were coming gradually, but those laws, some basic principles of humanity or some democratic principles, those were not, not actually visible in those laws. But this is coming little in the modern direction. So the next two phases, that is industrial relation in the post-independence period and post-liberalization period, that will be discussed in tutorial 1.5. So with this, I'm concluding this tutorial.